Okay guys, I know we have been dealing with trade. We've dealt with the Silk Road, the Indian Ocean Basin, stuff going around in Europe to Africa. But what we're gonna look at again is the transoceanic encounters and global connections. Now we're connecting again our Western and Eastern hemisphere together. And so there's gonna be three motives for exploration, which we've seen before. We're looking for new resources, fresh lands to cultivate crops on. We're looking for trade, specifically guns, textiles, for other manufactured items, for African gold and slaves. And then last thing is to spread religion, which we've seen spread through the trade routes before. So there's this phrase that we've always heard about exploration is for God, glory, and gold, which it kind of figures into this: God to spread religion, glory, just like passion for your nation, and then the last thing, gold. But we're going to see it lead into different trade items. There's other things that allowed for exploration. We had to have innovation, which we've seen in other chapters. The rudder, which is on the bottom of the boat, which allows the boat to change course of path. So it's not completely dependent on the wind. We know that there's new types of sails, such as the lantine sail. It's a more triangular sail. And the square sail, putting these both together, allowed them to take advantage of the wind currents. We see the compass was another invention created by the Chinese that helped our navigators figure out where they were and also to get to the current wind currents. And lastly, the charting of the wind currents, being able to know which ways the winds went, so you went with the wind, so your boat you didn't have to do much effort. And actually going with the wind helped them than going against the wind, and will allow for them to increase travel and get to places they previously hadn't. I know we've seen this in the last chapter, but again, these are things that are coming back in chapter 22 that are helping. So we know Portugal is going to be the lead nation to go out and try to explore. One of the main reasons why Portugal is going to be the lead nation is if you realize Portugal is all the way out here in Western Europe. And so if they're having to trade with the Italian merchants, the Middle Eastern merchants, they're having to pay astronomical amounts for items that are luxury items, that they want to circumvent that, which we've seen before in the last chapter. We see that Portugal is going to lead the exploration. They're trying to circumvent these people who are charging them really high prices for luxury goods. And so they're going to try to get to Asia. So Prince Henry is one of the lead people to say, let's try to go out there. Let's try to get our own ships. Let's try to circumvent these people. And so he's going to sponsor a series of voyages down the African coast. And as he comes down the African coast, he's going to start trading with the African villages. He's going to set up port cities. And at these port cities, he would bring manufactured goods and he would exchange it for African gold. Getting this African gold is going to be really important when we get to India and China, because that allows for that exchange. We're going to see another Portuguese guy is Bartolomeu Dias. He was on our last test. And we're going to see that he basically gets down to the Cape of Good Hope, all the way down to the bottom of Africa. He learns about the wind currents and how to get here, which will help further other navigators, which we've seen before. We know Vasco da Gama will eventually take Bartolomeu Dias's ideas, his information, and he will take the Portuguese all the way to Calcutta in India. So he basically, you see right here, he's coming down, he's realizing he has to go on this wind pattern to get down here, and he's able to get back, and also knowing about the monsoon weather, he's able to get to India and come back from India. So Christopher Columbus is going to be, he's going to be chartered by the Spanish Empire to try to do the same thing as the Portuguese are doing, because they're facing the same problems. High prices for luxury goods that are coming from the East. They're having to pay the Italians and the Middle Easterns a lot of money for those goods. So he's funded by the Spanish monarchs to find a route to Asia by sailing west. And we know from what we previously see that they have this idea that the world is a lot smaller, that there's no landmass in the west, but he lands in the Bahamas. He thinking he has landed in India, but he has no silk, no spices when he returns. And basically this movement that happens here is that it's going to pave the way for exploration in the Americas and the Caribbean. And so these are just the paths. We've seen this before. We did it on our big map on the last one. There's a couple of new people we have to add as explorers. Ferdinand Magellan, he is going to circumnavigate the world. So basically he goes across the whole entire world. Captain James Cook, he is going to basically map out Australia and New Zealand, Hawaii, Tonga, and Tahiti. So these are other people who travel into the Pacific. We're going to see the Portuguese, English, and Dutch. The reason why they're going to get involved is to control trade routes. They're really upset about having to pay higher prices for goods. And we're going to see these merchant vessels are going to start going to trading cities, and they're going to have to pay duties there. And it's just like gas stations. Like, you're going to have to stop at a gas station when you go on a long trip to get more food, to get more resources. And so when these guys stop at these trading ports, they're going to have to pay those duties there because they have to stop. And so trading companies will be created, and trading companies are basically joint stock companies. These joint stock companies pull money from rich investors that want to make money off exploration. So it's not one government funding it. We see it's very rich people coming in, investing money in this company so that they could turn a profit. And so these trading companies, we have the Dutch United East India Co., the English East India Co., and just by their name, they're trying to get to India. And they're allowed to buy, sell goods, and they're protected with cannons on their boat. They're protected with military so that they could bring back home luxury goods from India and turn a profit for the company. So one of the other trading regiments that's going to go on is trading from the old world, the Eastern Hemisphere, to the New World. And so we are going to see the old world is going to bring several things into the New World that we hadn't seen, such as disease, which is going to lead to a high plummeting rate amongst our Native Americans because they had no immunities to it. We also knew in the Americas they had no livestock. They're going to introduce cattle, sheep, pigs, and horses, which will help them give domesticated animals. They bring in wheat, peaches, coffee beans, turnips, olives, onions, citrus fruit, grapes, bananas, sugarcane, and honey beans. Okay, so sorry to make you hungry, but they're bringing in all these new resources. But in the same extent, there's things that are going back to the old world that weren't there. We know one of the main items in the old world was corn, maize. That's going to have a dramatic effect on the European population. It is going to bring in corn, is going to be new feed for the animals, and it's also a very cheap product that is going to feed the masses. Another product that is going to feed the masses is the potato. The potato is going to be cheaply produced, and it's going to increase the diet. It's these two items, potato and corn, potatoes, not just one potato, potatoes and corn, that add to the diet of the Europeans, which leads to a population growth. There's other things, vanilla beans, cocoa, pineapple, tobacco, peppers, pumpkins, turkeys, squash, sweet potatoes, and peanuts that adds to the diet of the European. But the two biggest impacts is potatoes and corns, which will increase the population in the Eastern Hemisphere. So when we look at this trade, this is called the triangular trade. We're going to see it originates in Europe, and we're going to see the Europeans are going to come down to the coast of Africa. They're going to bring manufactured goods, rum, and they're going to exchange that items for African slaves or gold, and then they're going to bring those slaves over to the New World, because what will happen from the Columbian Exchange is our population of the indigenous is going to decline. So there's not going to be many people to work on those plantations. So the Europeans will have to import workers, slaves, and we're going to see the slaves are going to take the second leg to come to the Americas. And eventually from the Americas to the Old World is they're going to take back all these raw resources. So this is an image of where slaves went. I'm going to show you a video. We see most of our slaves are coming into the West Indies because this is where we're going to have sugar production. They're also coming into Brazil. Brazil is going to have sugar production. And lastly, there's a few that go to the United States. The reason why there's very few that go to the United States is because at this time, we're going to see they relied mainly on indentured servants, white labor. And so that's why there's very few slaves that come here. And we'll see that will change when I show you this video. So let me pull up this video that I want to show you. So do y'all see those little black dots? They're going through the screen really fast. That's the slaves moving. They're small dots because there's not many going. But y'all see more? They're picking up and they're moving into the South America. You see by 1600, a lot of them are going to South America to work on the sugar plantations. Now the dots are picking up and there's a whole lot more moving across the screen. Do you see how most of them are going into the Caribbean and Southern America? Okay, do you see how it's picking up now? And again, more and more laborers are moving to the Caribbean and South America. Do y'all see how there's some moving into North America? So 1700 is really the year where in the 1700s that we have a lot of slaves moving into the Americas now. By 1800 in the Americas and North America specifically, they're going to pass, there's the 3/5 compromise that gets passed that says there will be no more importation of slaves from Africa. And so that's why there's none going to North America, but do y'all see all of them going to Central and the Caribbean and South America? So by 1860, it stopped. 1860, that's the breakout of the Civil War. By 1861, we're going to see by this time many people start to abolish slavery. And there was only by 1861, two main nations that had slaves still. It was the Americas and Brazil. Okay, so let's go back to our PowerPoint. So hopefully that gave light to these numbers of why we saw so much go to Central and South America and not much go to the United States. So we're going to see that slavery actually existed in Africa before coming to the Europeans. The Europeans experienced it when they started to trade with the port cities in Africa. The Portuguese, since they were the first ones to start exploring into Africa along the west coast, will replace European slaves with Africans. And many of the reasons why is because they need workers on their sugar plantations. We're going to see the first slaves brought into Spanish America was by 1518, but that's not the year that the preponderance of many of the slaves will happen. By the 1700s, we see that there's more slaves coming over into the Americas. We're going to see the 16th and 19th centuries, about 10 million slaves were shipped to the Americas, which we saw in the little video. And so there is, I think on your test, there's going to be a passage on the Middle Passage. And so if we look at this, this is a cargo ship. And if I'll see on this left-hand side, they're stacking the slaves. And the reason why is because they're trying to make their profits. Not all the slaves will survive. And so they're trying to make sure that there's enough cargo to bring over that will survive and that they could turn a profit. Okay, guys, I think that is the last slide of this. Make sure that you start finishing your next study guide. I think you should have time to work on that. There's going to be a crash course video. I will put that up, and I'll have good luck with it. Bye.